Okay, so if you look at number 9, sin x equals -1, so it's the trig function solved for a number, so we're good on there. 0 to 2 pi means we're going to look at the entire unit circle. So that means there's a potential to have two answers, so we have to be careful for that. Okay, so sine we know is the y value, so we're trying to find where the y value on our unit circle is equal to -1. So because it's -1, you're going to be looking on the main 4 points. The only one that has a y value of -1 is down here at 3 pi over 2. And that's going to be our only answer. Alright, so then if you take a look at number 10, we have tangent x equals -square root of 3. So it is solved for tangent. That's equal to -square root of 3. We are looking from 0 to 2 pi, so once again it's the entire unit circle, which means there's a potential that we will have multiple answers, so 2 answers. Okay, tangent we know is y over x, and we're trying to find where that's equal to -square root of 3, and we could put over 1 if we want to do that. So, remember, if you look on the outsides, we're going to be dividing y divided by x. So the only possible choices are 1/2, square root of 3 over 2, and square root of 2 over 2. So this is similar to problem number 6 that we looked at, but this time the square root of 3 is on top. So if you remember, I told you wherever the square root of 3 is, that's where you're going to put your square root of 3 over 2. And the other one will have to be your 1/2. The reasoning behind this is if you do divide these two fractions and you do the same change flip, that will make those 2's cancel and you will have -square root of 3 over 1. Okay? So if you have a problem that is tangent or cotangent and it has square root of 3 in it and just 1, wherever the square root of 3 over square root of 3 is, that's where your square root of 3 over 2 is going to go. So according to this, we need to have an ordered pair where x is 1/2 and the y value is -square root of 3 over 2. Now, this negative really doesn't matter where it goes. It could be here or it could be here. It just means you can only have one of them. Okay? So this means it cannot be in the first quadrant because both of those are positive. Now, if we look in the second quadrant, we do have 1/2, we have -1/2, and square root of 3 over 2. So that does follow the rule, even though the negative is on the 1/2. So 2 pi over 3 is one of our answers. Now we're going to keep going. In the third quadrant here, both of them are negative, so when you divide it will give you positive, so that's not going to work. So then if we look at the fourth quadrant, here we have 1/2 and we have -square root of 3 over 2, which is exactly what we wrote down, so the other answer is going to be 5 pi over 3. If you remember, I told you earlier, whenever you have multiple answers, they should have the same denominator, which they do here. So we know that's right. Alright, so we take a look at number 11. We have 2 sin x minus 1 equals 0, but is not solved for the trig function. So we're going to do that first. So this, if we add 1 over, 2 sin x equals 1. So if we divide by 2, sin x is going to be 1/2. We are going to be looking on the entire unit circle. So there's a possibility that we will have 2 answers, so keep that in mind. So we know sine is the y value. So we're looking for when the y value is 1/2, and it can be anywhere on the unit circle. So right here, the y value is positive 1/2, and that happens at pi over 6. The other quadrant where you have positive y values is in the second quadrant. So if you look here at 5 pi over 6, it also has a positive 1/2 in the y value. So pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6 are going to be your 2 answers. They do have the same denominators, which is what they're supposed to have. Alright, and then the last one for number 12, secant is solved for secant, so that's good. If you look over here, this is similar to number 5, where these are negative. So if you remember, we're going to find the coterminal angle so we know where to look on the unit circle, and then we'll go back to having negative answers. So I'm going to take negative pi, I'm going to add 2 pi to it, which will give me pi. And if I have negative pi over 2 and I want to add 2 pi, I'm going to add 4 pi over 2. So for purposes of my unit circle, I'm going to be looking between pi and 3 pi over 2. And that is in quadrant 3. So we're going to look in quadrant 3 for our answer. But when we finish, we're going to have to change it back to the coterminal angle that would be between these two radian values that it gave us. Okay, so for secant, we know secant goes with cosine, so this means 1 over x is equal to negative 2 over the square root of 3. I like to flip them around, so this is the same thing as when x is equal to square root of 3 over negative 2. Guys, keep in mind with the negatives, it doesn't matter if the negative goes on top or bottom, okay, it just means it's negative. So we are only looking in quadrant 3. And we're looking for when it's negative square root of 3 over 2. So that happens at 7 pi over 6. Okay, but if you look back at your original interval here, 7 pi over 6 is not in this interval. So because it's not in the interval, we need to subtract 2 pi so we can find the coterminal angle. Alright, in order to subtract 2 pi, we want to have the same denominator, so we're going to make it 12 pi over 6. So we're going to end up with negative 5 pi over 6 for our radian measure.